trauma can pass through your DNA. Parents have only lived this life once. So it's a lot of lust, it's a lot of ideals, and this is how we miss red flags, that when you're in the portrait, you can only see what's around you. I'm able to step back and I can see the full portrait. So I'm able to see some of the things that they're not able to see. She can place that kind of expectation, the fathering expectation on her partner to fill the void that her father should have provided.
It's time to get untitled. Aren't you just fed up of living up to a title? Whether it's the one you're born into or the ones you accept along the way. The weight of a title can be heavy. You might be a mother, a father, a doctor, or a CEO. I believe your title doesn't make you who you are. The truth is, you are so much more. So come inside, strip away the titles, perceptions, and narratives so that we can create a safe space filled with enlightenment and self-discovery. But the real question is, are you ready to get untitled? Hello and welcome back to the Get Untitled podcast. I'm your host, Chloe, and today I'm here with Kelly, who is a relationships therapist. She was also my therapist, and we have such a great relationship, and she has a wealth of knowledge. So I've invited her here to share some gems and nuggets. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here, and it's also your birthday, so
it is.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
I feel so honoured that you've chosen to spend your birthday here with me.
You know, anything for you, Chloe. You know.
Love it. Right. So I know obviously I've given you a bit of a brief overview, but for the audience, do you want to give a bit of share a little bit of your journey around how you got into therapy?
Oh, wow.
And maybe a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, sure. So my journey into therapy, interestingly, was one that I was always the go-to person, like with my friends. People would always come and talk to me about their problems, and I would always offer a listening ear. And, you know, when 1, 2, 3, 4 people come and talk to you, you then start to wonder, oh, maybe this is something, you know, maybe it's a bit of a call-in. And I would say that kind of helping people is something that's probably within my genes and my DNA, because my family, I come from a family of people who like to help.
Okay.
So, so I've, worked in children's social care for over 20 years. And when I was 36, I just decided, right, I'm going to, train. I'm going to follow my passion and train as a therapist. I wasn't as confident, as I'm saying it today, very unsure, but just gave it a try.
Wow.
Started my certificate. My daughter was 2 at the time. So, wasn't really in the position to do it, but I did it.
That's a big risk.
That it was a massive risk at that time, but I just thought there was something in me that felt I needed to follow this. There was something in me that was pulling me. So I said, you know what, I'm going to follow it. Started off with my certificate to see whether it was something that I think I could see myself doing. Absolutely loved it. And my tutor said, you definitely need to train. And I went on to do my diploma, had my second baby as well. I was pregnant while I was training.
Oh, wow.
And had her while I was doing clinical placements, and qualified in 2018, and the rest is history. And here we are years later, with a private practice, thriving private practice, and lots of clients that, I feel humbled to be invited, into their world and to be part of their journey. So yeah, it's a very humbling experience, but absolutely love it. So,
I gotta give you your flowers, girl, because with a 2-year-old and then you had another pregnant child. Listen, I feel like that's your story alone is a testament to just persistence, grace, and determination. So well done.
Yeah.
And why relationships? Because obviously you've got a background with, social care with children.
Yeah.
Many people would have kind of stayed in their niche and just pivoted. Like, what made you? I know you probably do more than just relationships. But that seems to be like what you're known for.
Well, relationships, is the centerpiece of who we are. We are designed to connect. So I do lots of individual therapy, but there's always going to be relationships are always going to come up. So it may not just be, intimate relationships. It's going to be relationships with your parents, if you've got children, if you've got friends, siblings. It all plays a part in our life. Nobody is able to walk this earth without being in engagement or in any kind of relationship with somebody. So there's always going to be that element, but I do enjoy working with couples because it's just interesting to get a window into their world and to be able to I'm able to zone out and see the full picture. So I always say to individuals and couples that when you're in the portrait, you can only see what's around you. I'm able to step back and I can see the full portrait. So I'm able to see some of the things that they're not able to see. So sometimes when you're in relationship with somebody, you feel that you're approaching or coming across a particular way. But then when you zone out a little bit, you can see actually they're not able to see themselves fully. And that's something that none of us can fully see ourselves,
That's why we have mirrors.
That's why we have mirrors, exactly. So it's just important to be able to help people to just step back a little bit, pause, think about maybe some of the things that maybe they're not necessarily connected to that is actually playing out in the relationship. So yeah, it's really interesting.
That's spot on. You mentioned 4 different areas and different relationships. I think it would be good today if we kind of broke down each one, because you seem like you've got a wealth of knowledge. When we started therapy back in, oh my goodness, it was before the lockdown.
Yeah.
So I know that I initially came on board and I was like, I want you to give me some therapy for my relationship at the time. And we ended up doing, just 1-to-1 because my partner at the time wasn't ready to come on board. And we started with parental relationships. So maybe we start there. And then it felt like a whole full journey of all of those different relationships that you mentioned around relationship with self, friendships. Yeah. But how does the relationship we have with our parents affect or inform the romantic relationships we have?
Ooh, it's the blueprint. I always say that to my clients is that the relationships that you have with your parents, they are your first teachers, and they teach you about what relationships how you will manage relationships going forward based on the relationship they have with you and also the relationship that you view them having with each other. So that helps us to then we then start to build a framework around that, because that's what's normal to us, because that's our only kind of frame of reference, or just our understanding of relationships. It's through them, whether it be positive or whether it be negative. We may start to normalize it if that's what we've been marinated in. So there may be some cases where you have relationships with your parents and you can see this doesn't feel right. It doesn't. When I grow up, I don't want to have children and parent my child the way how my mother parented me. That's a statement I hear quite a lot, and there might have been some aspects I might have said the same, but actually we follow right through and we do exactly what it is that we say we don't want to do, but we just do it subconsciously. We don't even realize that we're doing it. And it's when you give yourself the opportunity to examine it, then you start to see, oh my goodness, I'm actually following in the same patterns of what I experienced and what I saw as a child.
Okay. So there's 2 things that you said that just obviously sparked a thought around how our attachment styles, because I had no idea what an attachment style was back when we were doing therapy. And I never thought about it in my relationships, but I guess attachment styles link from how you were parented when you were really, really young. Can you share a little bit about attachment styles and how that parental relationship links in? Some people might have never even heard of it, like I had.
So attachment styles is about how we understand relationships and how we connect with people. I think there's something important to mention is that, when you're a child and you're growing up and you see your adults as these big formidable characters that, you know, you have to look up to, sometimes we place these expectations of them that they are supposed to know everything.
Yep.
Right?
Been there.
Which makes sense because they brought you into the world, you know. But one of the things that I'll always say is that your parents have only lived this life once. Just like us. We've only lived this life once. And we are often born into situations and we are literally just trying to figure it out. And we can sometimes give each other a hard time that you're supposed to know. But if you've not been taught a different way, how are you supposed to know? So when a child is growing up in a family where there might be lots of chaos, so there could be domestic violence, we could have parental mental health, and that is a big thing. There could be people that are displaced from maybe, you know, other extended family members or communities. Parents could have experienced significant trauma. There could be, you know, people could have migrated from other countries, you know, and I think of myself as being a Windrush descendant. You know, my grandparents left their home, left everything behind to come to the UK. Do you know what I mean? With no family, you know, to figure it out. So what then happens is when you have these children, as a parent is trying to get to grips with what is this parenting experience going to be like, because babies don't come with a manual. You're trying to build a relationship with this baby and this child, and sometimes we don't have the tools. So we can create, so attachment styles could be created, such as, you know, insecure, avoidant attachment styles, where maybe you weren't given the opportunity to, you know, your parents weren't able to emotionally regulate you, you know, teach you about your emotions. They didn't give you the affection that you needed. They may have been quite distant from you for various different reasons. You know, they could have been working, or maybe they find, you know, affection, physical or emotional affection. They may find it really uncomfortable because they never got it. They never experienced it. So it can create that kind of avoidance, you know, attachment style, where a child then has to almost has to kind of learn to emotionally regulate themselves, which self-soothe. So it means that they go into survival mode. So they then think, right, I can't rely on anybody to give me affection, so I'm going to have to just work on it myself. So they create this kind of barricade around them so that they don't get too close to somebody else, because being too close to somebody means that it's not going to be safe, because that's what they experience with their parent.
Wow.
You know? Yeah.
That was some gems right there. I felt like I was reflecting on my childhood. So with what you've just explained, I hear a lot of parallels between a man finding a woman that's like his mum, and that women, we chase men that are like our fathers.
Absolutely.
How does that all come into play?
It's because it's what's normalized. It's what's normal for us. If we are used to, you know, a parent where maybe father wasn't around, and you then grow up to then enter into a relationship with somebody, often for girls and for women in particular, if they've not had a positive experience or they've not had much interaction or any interaction with their father, often they are chasing a man who is going to be a father figure to her. And what can happen, it's not all the time, she can place that kind of expectation of fathering. She can place that kind of expectation on her partner to fill the void that her father should have provided. So then these massive kind of expectations and responsibilities may be given to the man to almost kind of parent this woman, when actually it's not his job, first and foremost, because, you know, this is where we get into talking about the relationship with ourselves. What's our responsibilities in terms of self-soothing, but also what is appropriate to expect from a relationship. There's a difference. But also sometimes when we're chasing men that may be unavailable, emotionally unavailable, like the father that, they had, he may not even have the tools in order to be able to function in a healthy relationship. So as soon as he feels she's starting to be codependent and lean on him and expect and want him to do things for her, he's like, this is too much. I can't do this. So he may pull away.
Wow.
To get a bit of a break. But again, it depends on his attachment type. He may then start to miss her, and then he then leans back in, but when it gets too intense, then he pulls back again. So there's this push and pull. So often you find that avoidance may attract maybe an anxious attachment type person. So somebody who wants them, but they know that they're not necessarily going to get their needs met, so they continue to chase because that's normal, and maybe that's something that they experienced as a child. Whereas the avoidant, it's okay when it's too intense. I need to draw back because I can't get too caught up in this because actually it's not safe. Wow. So both parties don't feel safe, but their way of interacting with each other is different, but fundamentally it's the same thing. They don't feel safe, and that's what's playing out.
So it's like you've explained that I say we because I'm putting myself in it. We chase what's missing, but then we attract what's familiar. So it's like, as you just explaining that, it's like they're chasing, like you said, could be that maternal instinct. And then what's familiar is, like you said, that avoidant attachment style. So it's almost like so how do you get your clients through stuff like that? Is that like a perspective change? Is it years of therapy?
Well, it's down to people where they're at in their own journey of life and whether they're ready to do the work. The one thing that I will always say is that often people don't necessarily want to, not that they don't want to heal, but the work that you have to do in order to hold that mirror up to yourself and try to work through the things, the gaps, the voids, the patterns. It's not an easy thing to do, and it does take years because it's almost like having to rewire the brain. If your brain has been wired, up until this point where, you've created ways of coping, your brain then it's almost like you have to do a complete overhaul to then teach your brain to do something different. And that can take a long time, and it's not something that you can do all at once.
It's a journey.
It's a journey, and I always talk about the the story of the hare and the tortoise. The hare likes to instant gratification. Let's get this thing done quickly, whereas the tortoise, is the one that moves slowly. But slow and steady often is the thing that wins the race. So, but people have to be ready.
But I think it also shows the element of being self-aware. So this brings us on to how do we become more self-aware, one, and two, people speak about the relationship with yourself informing the relationships you have with others. Can you just share a little bit more about that? Because for some people, they may not see that parallel.
Yeah. It's a difficult one. And again, it's a personal, almost kind of, I don't know if epiphany is the right word, but some people just start to have particular feelings within themselves that something's happening here. It's either something's happening where I feel like I'm not making any progress, but I'm the common denominator. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes people may say things to them that maybe they're not ready to listen, but then maybe one day, actually, if the same thing keeps happening over and over again, sometimes we do have to kind of pause and think.
I've heard that a few times.
Yeah. Do you know what? Maybe I need to really think about this, or, it could be depression. It could be situations. It could be heartbreak. It could be something that happens that then causes you to reflect, to step back and say, do you know something? I think I need to address this.
Wow.
And I have lots of clients that come to me who have never been to therapy before. And I'll always ask, what is it about now that's brought you to therapy? And there are, there's a myriad of different, reasons that they say, you know what, I've been feeling quite low for a long time, or the ending of a relationship, or, this has happened or that's happened. And actually, I feel like I'm ready to now pull off the Band-Aid, open up Pandora's box, do the operation. And I'm ready to get down and dirty and do this. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And for some people around the relationship with their self, because therapy's definitely, like you said, it's that mirror. And it's not only just looking at the mirror, it's the therapist that's positioning the mirror in a different angle for you to get a different perspective. Because you can look and think, oh, I know myself, I'm quite self-aware.
Absolutely.
And the hardest person to see really is yourself. So for me, therapy was a big tool that helped me to understand more about me. But what are some other tools and tips that you could suggest? Maybe someone's not ready to go therapy just yet, but they want to understand more about the relationship with their self.
Yeah.
Are there any tips that you can give, and how important is it to understand that relationship with self?
It's key and it's fundamental. If you don't understand who you are, then how do you show up? How do you know how you show up in the world? And how do you get to understand, are you actually being who you want to be? Are you being your authentic self? And those are the kind of questions that you may want to, may ask yourself. But for people who may not necessarily be ready for therapy, or, there's various different situations that doesn't allow you to maybe, do that. One of the things that, I also get my clients to do, even between sessions, and anybody can do this, is, journaling can be amazing at just starting to understand what's going on in your mind. And I say, when I offer these suggestions, it's not just theory based. I actually do it myself. So I always offer things that actually I do myself. So journaling, even for myself, I found quite difficult to do. My mind was always racing, and what I tasked myself is, right, I'm actually going to do this every morning as a way of preparing myself for the day. And I think I'm on day 148.
Wow.
And if I go back and I look through the notes that I've written, you can see the patterns of your limiting beliefs, how you're seeing yourself, how you may be showing up in the world. And that really gives you an indicator as to how you start to get to know yourself. Like dreams, I dream quite a lot. So, writing down the dreams, writing down the dreams and seeing, how, what's actually playing out, and things that you may have dreamt about that then comes to pass maybe later on.
Yes.
I'm definitely a very spiritual person, believe in God, and, really building that relationship. Not everybody wants to go to church. Not everybody, there's lots of things that could be attached to somebody maybe not going to church, or, you don't have to be Bible believing, you don't have to be Christian, spirituality is something that's within all of us. So for me, that's been a like a really big framework in terms of understanding, spiritually what comes up for me, reading books. People, self-help books are like a £1 billion kind of empire right now. And people can say anything that they want to say in order to make some coins.
Yeah.
However, it's about finding the right kind of books that touches your soul, and you will know, actually, this book really resonates with me. Yeah. And I'm a massive bookworm. I don't read as much as I used to, but I've got lots of books. And what I have done is started to really read and, digging back into reading again. And I will suggest books that I've actually read that really they've actually resonated with my soul. So it's about connecting with your soul and saying, actually, yeah, this book, yeah, I can really identify and I can really take things from it. So it's those kind of things, you know. It could be exercising. It could be meeting with friends, and if you've got a really good core group of people around you who can show you who you are. You know, they say, you know, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are, you know.
My mum used to tell me that
all
all
the
throughout my
time.
childhood.
Yeah, all the time. You know, who you surround yourself is a reflection of who you are. And, you know, you start to see parts of yourself or what you're giving, what you're projecting out into the world, reflecting back in the way maybe how you interact with people, how people see you and what you give out. So, yeah.
Oh, I
Just
love that.
various
Gems,
different-
nuggets. We've got journaling, self-help books, friendships. Okay. I can definitely resonate. I began life coaching about 7 years ago, but a lot of it stemmed from me undergoing that journey of
Yeah.
who am I, etc.
Yeah.
Journaling was something that I struggled to be consistent with, but every time I did it, I felt like
You learn something new. You read
It's-
the words on the page and like, oh wow, I didn't even know that about myself.
and I would literally keep all my journals because sometimes I'll go back and I'm like, was you really crying about that boy? Was you really upset about? It's like I look back at things and I'm like, this really had me in a chokehold. But I wouldn't, you know, life moves on. You don't really think about things. But I definitely remember coaching clients and saying, journaling, speaking to friends and asking because your friends can give you a perception of yourself
Honestly,
that you don't even.
you are the portrait, and they can zone out and see a little bit more of you than you can see in yourself.
Yeah.
And it's about that accountability as well. Do you know? I think it was Iyanla Van Sant that said it. She said, "A man who is not accountable to anybody is a danger to himself."
Yeah.
It is so dangerous. And you know, this could, you know, potentially be my perception, but I do feel that people who don't have a good core group of people who can, you know, that who can really love them, really, you can be yourself and they see you and they're able to speak to your soul. And if you don't give people access to you, and I say it very carefully because we do have to be mindful about who we allow
In our
to
inner
speak
circle.
in our circle,
Yeah.
and who we allow to speak into our lives.
Definitely.
Because, you know, we've all got our own issues, you know, and sometimes we're projecting our stuff into other people's stuff. But if you don't allow yourself to be accountable to somebody, you are going to be out here doing some stuff that you shouldn't be doing, basically.
Going buck wild.
Buckwan, you know, I want to be PC about it, but you know, we can be doing all kinds of stuff. And, you know, I always say that sometimes we prolong our own suffering when we're not accountable, when we don't feel that nobody can tell us anything. But when we give ourselves an opportunity to trust, to pause, to listen, to connect with self, with spirit, you then start to see things start to change as you start to allow things to land within you. Seeds are planted, and it can change your life. But also as well, it's about, you know, kind of, it's not that it's transactional, it's reciprocity. You know, it's give and take. If I don't allow anybody to be accountable to me and tell me when I'm moving a bit, you know what I mean, sideways, they can't trust me to do the same for them.
True.
That, and to me, those kinds of relationships, I don't think are good for us, because
Yeah. No one wants a yes man as well.
nobody wants a yes man. Sometimes you need to be told,
Yeah.
okay, you're moving sideways, you're not showing up as your best self, and this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm witnessing. And it's not that you agree in that moment. It may be, actually, I need to let this one land. I need to let this
needs
one
to marinate.
process. I need to let this one marinate. And you might feel some type of way, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, and you may need to say, yeah, I think I'm going to need to just take 5 for a minute. And let it land and really start to review. And the journaling can be amazing in terms of helping you to really see yourself and allow things to come up. Your body communicates to you. Your body will talk to you and say, okay, this is what our real true belief about ourselves. That's what's actually really happening. And you can write it down. And I think we are so kind of fearful of almost being found out, you know, because nobody wants to be that guy to say, actually, I feel like I'm actually unlovable. Who wants to shout that from the rooftops and wants other people to know that? Nobody wants that.
It's like vulnerability.
It's so vulnerable. It's so vulnerable.
Like Brené Brown has a whole segment. I think she did a TED talk on vulnerability.
I love her. I love Brené. She was one of the first people when I went on my journey, and you know, things started really early for me. After I had my first child, I was in a very, very dark place. You know, breakdown of my marriage and things like that. And I remember a pastor coming to my house. He was really good, and he's a qualified psychotherapist.
Okay.
And yeah,
Don't hear that every day.
right, okay. And he came to see me, and my daughter was about 5 months old, and I was just traumatized. And he suggested the Brené Brown book, Daring Greatly. My gosh, that book just
Change your life.
it just changed my perspective. It changed my life. It helped me to understand myself at that point. And I was 34 at that time, 34 at that time. And I was thinking, wow, it blew me away. And I then told everybody about it, you know. And I believe, you know, that was when I then started to kind of entertain that idea of, I would love to be a therapist. I'd love to be able to just be able to come alongside people and support them based on some of the things that I've been through. But actually, I think I might have something to offer, but I was so scared because I'm thinking I'm no way in any position to be telling anybody anything with, you know, with everything that's going on in my life.
No,
but
that's what qualified you, though.
well, this is it.
I'm
you
sure
know.
you see a lot of similarities in your clients. You're like, I've been there.
Well, you know, I remember when I was training, and my our tutor said to us is that you get the clients that you need, and I, you know, used to think, well, what does she mean by that? And Chloe, I tell you, there are some clients that may mirror exactly what's going on for you, or you may not even realize it, but it's something that they say just hits you in the chest. You're like, oh my goodness.
That's how I felt as a coach. I had a client, and I was like, I went through that. And you almost don't want to project, but it's like that level of, I know exactly what you're going through because I have been there. Or they're saying things, and it's like, as you're giving them an answer, you're answering yourself.
Yeah.
You're answering your own need.
Absolutely.
And it's like, if you'd never had that conversation with that client, you might have never got that answer.
Well, this is the thing. And there's something about, you know,
I love that.
Information about things, you know, like I always say that, and again, like I say, this is my personal experience, is that I feel that God speaks to me through various different mediums, through different, it can be strangers, it can be something that I read, it could be through prayer, it could be dreams, it could be anything. And one of the beautiful things about being a therapist is people think you're coming to teach, I'm coming to teach them. And it's like, no. Number one, I'm not your teacher. I'm just here to listen. I'm just here as a sounding board. And, you know, and I just offer a different perspective. I might see things that maybe you don't see, and I'll just ask a question based on that. But actually, they teach me a lot as well. We you know, and I think, and that's the beautiful thing about therapy. And, you know, what is also important to mention as a therapist is that we also have to have our own supervision.
Yes.
To make sure that, you know, I'll always say that we're not bleeding all over the client, because when you said, I don't want to project onto, you know, your coaching clients, but it's important to have that supervision to make sure that you are practicing safely and ethically, so that you're not bleeding and pouring all your stuff into the client, because it has to be the client stuff. But also I have my own therapy as well, because I think it's important, you know, when you qualify as a therapist, there's no requirement for you to be in your own therapy. You have to have supervision, but there's no requirement for therapy. But for me personally, I think it's really important for you to have your own therapy when you're taking on lots of client stuff plus your own stuff.
That baggage, you're now wearing it. You're going to bed thinking about that lady just told me what happened to her when she was 7. And it's like if you're
You need
anything like me,
to.
you're just internalizing, you're thinking, you're
Absolutely.
reflecting. And
Yeah,
that's
you
probably
need
what
to.
makes you a great therapist, because you can sit and reflect on a session and come back with it, but you're still taking that baggage. So that makes sense.
It. Yeah. So, part of my self-care is making sure that I'm healthy for myself so that I can then be healthy for others. You know what I mean? So it's really important for me to have a place where I can examine and explore some of the things that might have come up that I've recognized in myself, and to find ways to address and to deal with it. And I think that's really important. And supervision operates almost kind of similar in parallel. So it's like double down,
I love
I've got
that.
my supervision and I also have my own therapy as well. And that's something that I keep very close to me. And that is, for me, helps me to be the best kind of therapist that I can be to my clients. So
Sounds like you have a great support network, and that in itself, obviously you found that in supervision. I'm sure you've got friends and family that definitely help to support you. I know that we spoke a little bit on friendships, and I think that's a key staple within a support network. What would you say are some of the foundations of a healthy friendship? Because I think a lot of people have friends, acquaintances and stuff, but what would you say, like, what are some of the staples that make up a healthy friendship that can add to someone's support network?
So I think very similar to intimate relationships, it's about thinking about what is it that you want from that relationship. One of the things that that most people, and I've when you go on Instagram and you read up, people want to be themselves. We all just want to be able to be accepted as our fullest self. I don't want to have to hide who I am in order to be liked by you.
Yeah.
It's about, if I show all parts of myself, will you still love me? Will you still like me? Am I still worthy? And I think it's about, trying to understand, what people's capacity is. Are they aware of themselves? Are they able to kind of say to you, are they confident enough? Do they love themselves enough where they're able to love you in a similar way, to say, you're moving kind of sideways, and I want you to win. So I'm gonna say this. It's uncomfortable, but because I want you to win, and because I'm seeing things that I don't think you're showing up as your best self, I'm gonna say to you, that's what friendship is that it's not all about the good times, going out for dinner and having fun and what I mean, everything is happy clappy and you agree with everything. It's also about being able to hold them accountable, to be able to say, actually, I want more for you, and I think I can see more for you, and I want to support you, and it's reciprocal, that you're both able to do that for each other, that when you're in a situation that you feel comfortable to be able to tell them your full truth without judgment. But also it's one of those ones where it's not a chore being a friend. With some friends, it can be a bit
laborious.
It can be a bit laborious. If your life is busy and you don't speak to them for a month, a week, 2 months, whatever, then it's going to be a problem. Then
none of my friends are like that, but I have had that.
Right?
And you're like,
you can't do that.
You should be able to pick back up where you left off from and keep it moving.
That is a beautiful friendship when, everybody can, life is lifing on all of us.
Yeah.
And that, people don't take things personally, that, oh, I haven't spoken to you in 3 months, you've forgotten me. And it's like, well, no, life is happening. But you can have a friend that said, how are you doing? And you pick up from a conversation that you had maybe 6 months ago, as though nothing has happened. So I think it's quite important to be able to have those kind of friendships that it flows. So we're constantly evolving and changing. Can your friendship withstand the storms of time? There's going to be times when you're not of your best self. There's going to be times when you're going to go through your own personal things, you know. Can it withstand that? Can you still love and, you know, cheer for your friend, you know, when, you know, if they're winning and maybe life might not necessarily be doing the same for you? Are you able to want the best for your friend? Do you know what I mean? So I think that's important for friendship. So
Oh, I love that. You're always giving some good gems. I know what you were speaking about before was difficult conversations that you can have with friends. I find that boundary setting is something that I really struggled with. Are there any tips you could give me and the audience about how best to set boundaries? What is a boundary? How do you enforce it? How do you uphold it? Because when you love someone, you've built such a rapport, sometimes it can be hard to have that difficult conversation.
I think boundaries are more for yourself sometimes, because if you're depending on your personality type, so I know that one of my personality personality characteristics is about being a people pleaser. So sometimes I might give and give, you know, and actually maybe I'm giving a little bit too much.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir.
You know? And so
You feel depleted,
You feel very depleted, and you don't understand why until you then maybe reflect and think, actually, maybe I need to put some boundaries in place. Because people don't necessarily do things in order to, you know, they're not trying to upset you. They're not trying to, you know, kind of, you know, step on top of your head. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're all trying to get our needs met, but we do have to do it with boundaries. And some of those things is about talking about it. Actually, this is my boundary. I can do this, but I can't do that. You may not want to, you know, you may not be able to explain, you know, what it's, you know, what that looks like, but it's about being able to kind of say, actually, I can't do this right now, or actually, this is my boundary. This is where my boundary lies, in this situation. And actually, I don't think I believe in, I don't think I believe that. And, you know, it's about, it's constant conversation. It's constant, it's a constant ability to be able to kind of have those conversations. Sometimes we have to update our boundaries. If you don't let people know what your boundaries are, they don't know.
Yeah, they can't read your mind.
They can't read your mind.
Boundaries are preferences. That's what I kind of see it as. It's like, it's just a preference.
It's just a preference. And we need to talk about it. And if, you know, if this is what you like and this is what you don't like, how do you then communicate that to somebody? You need to be able to communicate it in a way that they can listen. And if they don't, then that's when you start to think, is this friendship something that I can continue in if my boundaries are not respected? You know, some people may not like the boundary at first, but then they work with it. But, you know, it's a question that you do have to ask yourself in terms of, if somebody continues to violate my boundaries, is that really a friendship that I should really, you know, continue and entertain?
Oh, I love that. Say that again. Alrighty, I know we're short of time. I think one thing I want to touch on before we get into relationships, which is the most exciting bit for me, is more around friendship breakups. I think friendship breakups can feel like such a blow. For me, in the past, it's felt almost like a death. And I just wanted you to touch on what your experiences as a therapist around that, and any tips that you can give as to why does it hurt so much? That's what I want to know.
It's a relationship, isn't it? Relationships are, you know, you invest yourself, you bring yourself into. So when a relationship ends, as I said before, you know, we're wired for connection. It's painful because it is the death of a dream. Maybe it's the death of what was, but what can't be going forward, because we're evolving and we're changing. There are some friendships where, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard of the phrase, a season, a reason, and a lifetime. There are some people that come through our lives and they're not meant to stay. They might come to show you something, you know, in that season. They may have provided something in that season, but when you're kind of moving into another chapter, the next chapter of your life, some people can't follow you on that journey because they're on their own journey. We're all on our own journeys. And some people can't manage, they can't handle the new version of you.
Wow.
There are some friendships that part for a while and come back together. But there are some friendships where actually this is the end of the junction for you, you know what I mean? And we have to part. Now, there are some relationships where it doesn't have to be beef and argument. There's definitely an opportunity to mourn and to grieve the loss. You should be allowed to do that because it's the death of what was, you know. But, you know, it's about having that understanding of, do you know what, we're just in different places and we just need to part
And go our separate
and
ways.
go our separate ways.
And that's also okay.
And that's okay. It is okay.
Even though it hurts. It's
Yeah,
okay.
and it's okay for it to hurt, and it's all right for you know what I mean, for us to admit that, you know, and go through the grieving process. It's like a live death. So yeah.
Oh, I love this. Okay. Amazing. I'm glad we touched upon that because I remember crying over a friendship that broke up and thought, is this normal? Like this, you know, you see in the movies, it's normalized that we cry over a breakup, but we never see this side. So I'm glad that we've heard it from the expert herself.
Expert.
But yeah, I think the final area we haven't touched upon in much detail is relationships. And there's so many questions I want to ask, but I know we've literally got a little bit of time left. So I want to open the question up to you because I've got about 3 that I wanted to ask, but I don't know if there's any gems that you have on your heart around as a therapist. What are some of the common things you kind of hear coming in about relationships that maybe some of our audience might be able to just learn from so that we don't make some of these mistakes? What are some of the common denominators, etc.? And just leave that for you.
So when we come into relationships, I say this to people a lot, that we come into relationships and we are not our true selves with the other person. Okay. What comes into the relationship is a representation of our ideal selves. Yeah? Okay. You come in, I'm this person, this is my value, this is my morals, this is how I deal with conflict, this is how I deal with that. Versus 3 months down the line, and when real life starts to kick in and the dopamine has started to dissipate, you then start to see a different person. But hold on a second, that weren't how you were when we first met. Oh, no. That what you're seeing right now is actually parts of their real selves because the mask is now falling. They can't keep it up. We all do it because we are living on that adrenaline rush. You know, they say that when 2 people get together, it's a dopamine clash. So both people's dopamine, the chemical, the happy chemical, the love chemical, the oxytocin, that is what is at play here. So it's a lot of lust, it's a lot of ideals, and this is how we miss red flags, and we don't know, we don't see. We can, yes, because love will, you know, keep us together forever. That's not love. Hate to burst your bubble. That's actually not love. That's lust. Yeah. That's idealism.
Yeah.
Because as real life kicks in and you really start to see how people move when, you know, when it's all going down and real life is
the
really
truth.
Right? You start to see people are moving very, very differently. So it's really important for us to ask questions, to move slow, to watch people's behaviors and actions versus what they're saying. Are the two aligning? And people don't realize. And sometimes it's not done on purpose. Who they said they were versus who they actually are, because they're probably completely unaware that what they're saying and what they're doing are 2 very completely different things.
Wow, that's so true though. The representative
honestly, we all bring our representatives at the beginning of the relationship. You know, one person likes the other
Honeymoon
person.
period.
Yeah, you feel, it feels wonderful. You can be on the phone all night, you're chatting to them, you feel alive, you feel seen. And these are the things that we are craving often, that we're craving from another person: to be seen, to be accepted, to be desired, to, you know what I mean, to be able to talk, to be of interest to somebody, to be interested. It's a wonderful feeling to have that attraction. So your body reacts in a way that, I can see myself with that person. I can see myself having children with it. Do you know what I mean? But actually,
especially us women, we go on a
as
tangent.
women,
We're creating a whole
we're,
dream.
we're like, we've set the wedding date. You know, we've got the house. We've
had
about,
3 kids.
We've had 3 children.
We've travelled to 6 countries.
We've done it all, and we can see how we can do this, and we can live happily ever after. But the reality is that it's a lot more complicated than that. And often it's when people hit those pitfalls and they're having the same argument, and people are also bringing all of their childhoods into the picture. And they say that when you get into a relationship, you're making a choice to take on somebody's childhood trauma. And I said, wow.
That right there.
Oof. You're making a decision to accept that person's baggage, their childhood, and their childhood patterns, their traumas, everything. And we don't actually
unknowingly,
know.
yeah.
You don't know. You
It's
don't
like,
actually know.
It's not consensual.
No. Yeah.
And you got to unpick that baggage and decide, is this something I want to stay here and deal with and dig out?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There's so much more we could touch upon here, but I know that a key part of relationships breakdown is a breakdown in trust. So you've obviously mentioned so many different things that could lead to that trust being broken. One is that this is not what I bought when I signed this contract. You came as someone else, and now there's an imposter here.
Yeah.
The second is the childhood baggage and trauma. When there has been a break in trust, how does someone mend that? Because 9 times out of 10 people think about relationship therapy when there's a breakdown in the relationship. How hard or easy is that to mend?
It's not easy. It's not easy because what often comes to the surface is the childhood voids, and usually it's around abandonment and rejection and betrayal of trust. It's traumatic, you know, and what often happens is that, you know, if there's been a breakdown or a betrayal of trust or whatever, you know, the couple may say, we're going to work through it, we're going to stay together. Now, based on that statement, some parties may think, okay, so we never need to bring it up again. You know, we just need to move forward because we've decided to stay together. When actually that is, you know, actually some people don't actually know what it is that they're actually saying, because actually it's a lot more nuanced than that, because it takes a long time. And this is where sometimes some of the issues happen with couples when there's been a breakdown in trust. One person may say, but they keep going on about it, but we'd already resolved it. And it's like, no, it hasn't been resolved because it's still alive in that person's system. So unless you're ready to, it's almost like trying to put it back in its neat little box and put the bow on. No, you have to take everything out of the box, and you've got to examine it in a different way based on the information that you know now. What have you learned about yourself in terms of what has that betrayal brought up within you? You know, what has happened? Because if your body is reacting and your brain is reacting in a way, in a particular way to the betrayal, then there's a birthplace to that. It didn't start here. What's happened here is just, it's a mirror of what's actually within you, stuff that's already there within you. So what it's just done is it's just highlighted, you know what I mean? It's just brought it to the surface. You may not have been aware of it. It's about trying to go back to the core of where did that start? And usually it's childhood. Usually there's some sort of childhood pattern. There's some childhood abandonment, some kind of rejection that happened long before this relationship, because your body's reaction to it has been, okay, brain shuts down. We've got to protect ourselves because the brain just tries to delay death and annihilation.
Okay.
So there's a birthplace, so it's about going backwards to that. And some people have the bandwidth and have the emotional maturity to be able to walk that walk with their partner, and some don't because it brings up stuff in them. So there's shame, there's guilt, but there's also a birthplace of that, because if there's a betrayal or breaking a breach in trust, where did that come from? What was missing? What was the void in your life in order for you to get that need met, in order to break somebody's trust? Something happened to you before. It takes a lot of maturity to be able to do the work, to really expose those parts of yourself that subconsciously you don't know. You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
We could go deeper.
We could.
We could. Final question, and this is more so something you mentioned to me in therapy that I'd absolutely never heard of. And then we can wrap up here. And that is, what is transgenerational trauma? Because you touched on childhood trauma, you touched on a few things, but you mentioned that and we went through a whole history. And I think that would be so beneficial if you just touched upon that briefly.
So basically what that means, so there's transgender, well, it's all the same. It's intergenerational trauma and transgenerational trauma.
Okay.
Both the same thing. So basically it's trauma that's passed through family, like family patterns. So if there is a pattern where grandmother, great-grandmother, grandmother, mother, child, or you, there's an issue around mental health, or if there's a pattern around women doing things on their own and not having a partner, if there was a trauma that had happened, it's often passed down. So usually if the child is witnessed the mother being on her own, you know, raising children, that could be a pattern that you think is normal. That's you know, that's already happened. So then it then becomes normalized. Well, actually, men are not normally around. So actually, you know what I mean? I just get on with it. Or, you know, if there's a history of mental health, you know, often that can be passed down.
Okay.
Domestic violence is one thing that often can be passed down. So in terms of if there's been DV in like relationships with like a grandmother or mother, sometimes that child, then they say that the likelihood of, you know, that child either becoming a perpetrator or a victim of DV. So that is a pattern. That's a pattern that's then passed down. So it's very similar to that. So even if we look at slavery, coming from, you know what I mean, the Windrush generation, if we look at the way how, you know, how the Caribbean has managed, you know, slavery, we're still kind of second-class citizens. We're still fighting for equality, which is something that, you know, it gets a little bit better each generation, but it's still the same thing.
Okay.
You know? So when you think about it within families, it's exactly it's the same thing that's happening. And trauma can pass through your DNA. Trauma can change your DNA. And a lot of research is going into that now, where there's a little bit more kind of research and understanding about how traumatic events that may have happened in the, you know, the generation above can change the DNA of the next generation. So I'll give you a very tiny example, is that when a grandmother is pregnant with her baby, that grandmother is carrying the eggs or carrying her grandchildren. Because if she's got a female child, if she's carrying a female baby, by the time a woman is 5 months old, by the time a woman is 5 months pregnant, that baby girl has got all the eggs in her ovaries, in her developing little body, that she'll ever have in her lifetime.
Okay. I did hear we're born with all of our eggs.
Yeah,
That much I knew.
right?
But okay, that makes sense.
So if she's being traumatized, if grandmother is being traumatized while she's pregnant, that then can change the DNA of those eggs as well as that baby as well.
Wow.
And this is research. There's a book that I was reading it in a book by Mark Woolin called It Didn't Start With You. And it's about epigenetics. It
Yeah,
is an
I've heard of that
amazing book.
Yeah.
And that's how we explained it. So that gives us a little bit of an indication as to how intergenerational trauma actually passes down.
Okay. Thank you so much for explaining that.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. And I know that we haven't been able to go into detail
Yeah.
on everything, but you've given us so many little nuggets to take away. I'm going to listen back to this with my notepad and be writing notes. But before we wrap up, do you want to just share your social media handles?
Sure.
Where can people find you? I know that your therapy client list is booked. But where can people connect with you?
People can connect with me on Instagram. So I have my Instagram handle, which is Inner Transitions. At Inner Transitions.
Yeah.
And I also advertise on Psychology Today. Mm-hmm. And I also advertise on Barton. I can give you the handle, the actual website